What's happening, everyone? Welcome to Normal America Show. I'm your host, robnoerr. You may remember me, the guy that used to stream until this weekend when I had family stuff to do all weekend. Hope you all had a great weekend. I think the last that I talked to most of you was last Wednesday. I tried to do a little Spaces Wednesday. Then I tried to do a little mobile stream, which wasn't working out so well. And then even when I started streaming here, I got my normal setup, my non-home setup, and I was dropping frames like crazy. So, I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't come to that again. But it seems to be working fine now. Anyways, I had a fantastic weekend. I'll tell you a little about it. What's up, Machine Lies? I saw you there, man. It's been a while since we've talked. Hopefully you're doing great. There's Aftershock. The old school, the tech, like the sort of like, I don't know what you would call it. The old music that was sort of the, I don't know, 8-bit music. What's happening, Aftershock? Ogre, I saw you there. Ogre edited another short for me, which I'll be putting up on YouTube tonight or tomorrow. Probably 8 a.m. tomorrow. I'll schedule it to be released. But yeah, it's great to be here. So I'll tell you a little about my weekend. First off, apologies. I tried to do a live stream the other day, like I said. I did have Hank was sleeping, so I tried to do it on my phone. For some reason, Twitch was really lagging, like, I don't know why. So, unfortunately, it didn't come through as much as I want. We could talk about the border. I was hoping to chum in some lefties to yell at tonight. That would be fun. That's always good. I love debating people, so we'll see if we can do that. If not, we got a show for you. So, yeah, I'll tell you a little about my weekend. One of the greatest weeks I've ever had. I had a fantastic time. So, my wife, once a year, goes out with a bunch of her friends. And basically, this is what it's like to be an old man. Her friends are my friends. So, we have a lot of couples friends. And, so, you know, whether it be married or they're just dating each other, and the girls in the group go out once a year, usually not too far from where we live. This time they went a couple hours away into New York State around the Finger Lakes, and they had a great time. So I get to be the single dad. Now, last time that this occurred, the problem with being single dad is my parents and Courtney's parents are like vultures. So like anytime they feel that they could swoop in and get time with the grandson, they do it. So last year when this happened, basically it wasn't like I was single dad because grandparents were there the whole weekend and stuff like that. This time though, everyone was out of town. So my mom and my sister went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. My dad worked and wasn't around. Courtney's parents went to Louisville to a truck show because Courtney's stepbrother, actually his job is he basically remodels and rebuilds tractor trailers that are show trucks, like these $1 million trucks. He is phenomenal at it. And it's a really, like, I would love to do an interview with him, non-political, just about sort of the show truck world. It's really mind-blowing. As someone like me that could barely change a tire or change oil, to listen to him talk, like, they'll judge these trucks on things like every lug nut has to be facing the same way with, like, the writing on the same direction, and it's just the level of detail that they put into these is absolutely phenomenal. So anyways, there's some big truck shows. Louisville is one of the bigger truck shows, and my wife's parents went down there to see their son in the trucks that he had entered there, and I think they did very well. A couple of his trucks are going to be in the big national calendars and stuff like that, so really good. The happy jump music. What you talking about? Oh, Aftershock wants me to play this music. It'll probably get me struck. There's probably a reason I don't play this music anymore, but let's see it. Here we go, and here's the music. Oh, this song, yeah. Midnight Special. Man, that's a good one. Yeah, my wife leaving. That's one way to put it, neighbor guy. My wife leaving for the weekend was the best weekend ever. Shh. No, I missed her. I really did. But getting to spend. So I dropped my wife off Thursday with her friends. So I had Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and then my wife came Sunday. I took Hank to a little zoo. We did some hiking in the woods. Tried to watch the neighbor girl play soccer, but I don't know what was going on. It was like a big tournament, and we couldn't find her team. So it was a lot of fun. It really was. I had a great time with him. He's growing. I look back, again, I'm 39. I'm late to the game having a kid. But it's the best thing I ever did. It really is. Getting married and having kids, easily the best thing I've ever done. By a long shot. Like, not even close. I had a fun, interesting life up until that. A broke life, but fun and interesting. I partied my ass off. I could tell you stories till I'm blue in the face about stupid situations I've been in and funny stuff that's happened to me. But it pales in comparison to being a dad and being a husband. It's absolutely phenomenal. And it's weird because every point in Hank's life, I'm like, oh, I don't know if it could get better than this, you know? So I remember when he was just a little baby. I have this video. It's one of my wife's angriest moments. So for a little while, my wife worked after she gave birth. And so we were both working. And luckily we're in a position now where I could work a bunch of extra hours and she gets to stay home because I think that's really important. And one time my wife went to work and it was I happened to be, I'm always like I don't know why, but I'm always like, I'm such a paranoid person. So I do little things to prove to, like, you know, I like taking pictures of Hank when I'm doing stuff with him, but it also serves as like proof that I was doing stuff with him. That I'm not just sitting around. So I was taking a video doing tummy time with Hank and he rolled and it was the first time he rolled and I'm filming when he did it and I'm just like, yeah, I'm so pleased. And I sent it to my wife. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. Not realizing my wife was like, great, I missed that. I was at work. Did Hank outgrow the drum set yet? Hank destroyed the drum set is what happened. So he still plays at his grandpa's house on my wife's side. He's got like a bigger little kid drum set, like almost a real drum set that he likes beating on. So, yeah, it's really incredible, like spending time with him. And now is just watching him develop a personality and to the point where he's singing all the time, which I think is just the greatest. He's singing the whole ABC song, which is phenomenal. So it was great. It really was. I can't complain at all. There's not enough hours in the day, you know. I wish I had more time to stream. I wish I had more time to be with my wife and my son. And I like my job. I do. I like when I'm at work. But, you know, I wish there were more hours in the day to do that sort of stuff. Yeah, he loved that drum set. It had like a little cymbal. He smashed it off, and so it was broke. And then he broke the sticks on it too, which was pretty cool. But yeah, it was a great weekend. It really was. So Hankster rocked it. He had a ton of fun. One of the things that happened was where we were watching this soccer game. It was at a local high school, and they had a frisbee golf course that went through the woods. So we hiked through the woods, and he has a little stuffed pig that he took with him. So he's finding all these sticks and stuff, and we go through this path, you know, through the woods, and we probably walked it like half an hour, and we come out the other end, and I realized he didn't have his pig, so we had to walk the trail again, and then we found his pig, and he was so pleased. He calls his pig Dot, because it's got dots on it. He's like, there's Dot! He was so pleased. So it was like a cool little adventure, but it would have been bad news if we lost Dot, but we didn't. We found her, so kudos to us. In other news, have not heard back from Tim Pool's people. I don't know that I ever will. That's fine. He's under no obligation to bring me on. Still, it was cool to get mentioned on the show. And, you know, I was supposed to talk more with Destiny. He's not streaming this evening. I was going to reach out and see if he wanted to do something this evening, but he's not streaming. So I figured we'll just go forward with a regular show. I will be working a bunch of overtime this week. Such is my penance for spending more time with my family, or with my son last week. So now this week I end up getting called into work Saturday morning. So normally my shift would be, I have to be here Sunday night through Wednesday afternoon, but I clock out for hours while I'm here, but I still have to be here. This time, what often happens is if someone takes off, I end up working their shift as well. So I'll leave Wednesday, then I have to go to the office Thursday, and then I'll have Friday off. It will be my only day off. And then Saturday morning I come back in and I work Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I'll finally get off Wednesday. So it'll be a bummer. I'll miss my family for those 5 days. But, that's because I drank too much in college and didn't get a good job. And it is what it is. So no sense complaining. Make the most of it. And I think it'll be fine. But yeah, as far as not getting on Tim Pool's show, it would have been nice to get an offer. I think that not just because I want to grow my channel, which I do. I'm selfish, don't get me wrong. But I also think that I'm one of the best people on this side of the aisle. It's sort of pointing out these issues of corruption and things like that. I oftentimes feel that the conversation's more shallow when most people are having it. And so I would have loved to have that opportunity. Thank you so much for the cheer, Gizmo. I really appreciate it. I hope you're doing good, man. But it is what it is. So I put up 2 TikToks today, which you can go to my TikTok channel and check it out if you want. Remember, trying to get to 1,000 followers on TikTok so I could live stream there as well. But nonetheless, they were on Canada celebrating Nazis and on the testimony or the hearing of Merrick Garland. So I thought, why not focus on both of those? Let's start with Merrick Garland. Let's start there. If there's any lefty watching that wants to call in and argue with me about pretty much anything, great. I would prefer it not be a joke topic, but if you have something serious that you would like to discuss with me, happy to do so this evening. We'll start with the Merrick Garland testimony. So I won't bury the lead. I did you can go and find this on my Twitter account. So live Wednesday, I did do a Twitter Spaces, or X Spaces, whatever they're calling it now, on the testimony of Garland. So I didn't get to watch all of it, but I did watch enough that I saw an admission from Merrick Garland that I thought was quite astounding. And it's something that I haven't really seen anyone else point out. There are people saying what Garland should be impeached for various reasons. I agree he should be impeached, but the reason I give is different. And of course, the usual characters on Twitter, like Pisco and those sorts of people, argued with me about this, but they're always going to defend corruption, and they're unable to answer the biggest question surrounding this. So let me lay the groundwork for those of you that don't understand. And if you like, you could clip this section. I'll try to do a 2-minute rundown of what's going on. So maybe I'll record it myself here. So here we go. Here, wait. Why don't I do this? We'll do a little YouTube video. We'll do that. Nope. The overlay's fine. Yeah, let's eliminate the overlay in the chat. There we go. So, the committee hearing with Merrick Garland, I thought there were some things worth talking about that was impeachable that Garland admitted to. Now, I'll fully admit that I think Garland's corrupt. I think our FBI's corrupt. I think I could point to evidence showing their double standards and how they treated people surrounding Trump versus how they've treated people that are more establishment, such as the Bidens, the Clintons, etc. But it doesn't matter what my opinion is. I think what's important here is, by Garland's own admissions in this testimony last Wednesday, he gave the reasoning for why he should be impeached. Now, there's this guy Weiss that's been running the investigation into the Bidens, into Hunter Biden. And we have IRS whistleblowers working under Weiss that have came out and said that there are all sorts of irregularities that they think suggest that Weiss isn't being impartial. So, for example, they were tipping off Biden before they served a search warrant. They were told that they couldn't search Joe Biden's property because it would be bad for optics. They let the statute of limitations run out. They offered a plea agreement that a judge basically said she'd never seen an agreement like this before, and it forced Weiss to acknowledge he too hadn't seen that. There was, the IRS whistleblowers also said that Weiss told them that he didn't have ultimate charging authority. Weiss then said he did, but for some reason he was appointed as special counsel anyways. So we knew all of that going into the testimony, and Garland gets asked about it. Garland gives the old Obama excuse. I didn't know about anything until I read it in a newspaper. And of course the Garland defenders are going to say, well, this is a good thing. It's actually good this happened because Garland said that he would stay out of it, that he wasn't going to get involved, that the DOJ and the Biden administration wasn't going to get involved. They let Weiss go, and wherever the outcome goes, so be it. But understand this, the reason that they said this was to assuage the public, much of the public that already thinks correctly that there's a double standard at the DOJ, the FBI, etc., to assuage their fears that the DOJ Rand, the executive of it, is Joe Biden, is investigating Joe Biden's son, and whether or not Joe Biden and the DOJ would put their thumb on the scale to benefit Joe Biden's scale. No one is worried that Merrick Garland and the DOJ is going to push too hard against Hunter Biden. That's not why they had to publicly say, look, we're going to stay out of it, we're not going to look into it. So what happens is, whatever you may believe is the reason, Merrick Garland at the end of the day admits that he thought that the situation now required a special counsel. And there are multiple reasons that you could want a special counsel, but one of the most important is because you want an independent analysis, an independent investigation that is not based on people that could have a conflict of interest. In this case, the FBI and the DOJ is ran by Joe Biden, so could they be impartial in investigating Joe Biden's son? So there are conflicts of interest, there are claims that there isn't impartiality and potential bias, not from random Breitbart people or random Fox News people, but from career IRS people that are working under Weiss. And they're saying this investigation's not going normally, they're basically helping cover this up. They're leaving statute of limitations run out, etc., all the stuff I said before. So Garland says, Weiss comes to him and says, I want special counsel status now. Now, this is already questionable because if Weiss already had the ability, as Garland's testifying to go ahead and bring any charges in any jurisdiction he wanted, why would he need a special counsel status? Nonetheless, let's forget that for a minute and just say Garland agrees that there is a need now through an independent investigation that's not beholden to the FBI or DOJ to have an investigation into Hunter Biden. So he appoints Weiss the special counsel. Now, people have correctly pointed out, it looks as if the statutes say that it has to be someone appointed outside sort of the executive branch agencies. So already there seems to be a conflict, but let's skip that part for now as well. And just goes with this. Merrick Garland as the DOJ is bound to appoint someone that he feels will be impartial. In other words, if he thinks there is a necessity for a special counsel, it is his duty to appoint someone that he thinks is qualified and who will be impartial and unbiased to the greatest ability possible to actually do a thorough investigation and get to the bottom of this. One, because we want justice brought, but second, to assuage fears of the American people that there is a double standard going on. And so that's what Garland does. He appoints a special counsel. What he says when he's in this committee hearing last Wednesday, when asked about all of the claims that were brought up by the IRS whistleblowers, statute of limitations running out, things like that, Garland says, oh, I just heard about those things in the newspaper. I didn't want to look into it because I promised I wouldn't look into it. But again, that promise was to assuage the American people that the DOJ wouldn't be putting their thumb on the scale to benefit Hunter Biden. Once he heard credible accusations about this investigation and how it was benefiting Hunter Biden and thereby Joe Biden, it was his duty to look into those accusations, especially if he was going to appoint a special counsel. So he agrees that there's enough reason to appoint a special counsel, and who does he pick to lead it? The same guy, Weiss, that his own employees underneath him have talked about him not being impartial, about how poor the investigation was going, about how it was done unusually to benefit Hunter Biden. Why would he appoint the very guy that he, in his own words, knew that these credible accusations were out there against? What Garland should have done, if he felt necessary to appoint a special counsel, was to appoint someone who wasn't involved in the already process that had been accused of not being impartial. He should have appointed someone outside. Now, there's no reason that if he appointed someone outside, it couldn't have been someone who was also going to help the Bidens or was going to be biased. But at least he could say, okay, we took these accusations seriously, we tried to appoint someone outside, and we're going to keep a hands-off approach unless we see warranted reasons that this investigation is corrupt as well. We're going to let them do what they want and give them the powers that they need to have a thorough investigation. The impeachable offense is, regardless of what you think I think, or what you think people that have talked about this corruption is, Merrick Garland admitted two things. One, there was credible enough reason to warrant a special counsel. Second, he understood that the person he appointed had been accused of being biased and benefiting the Bidens, but he still chose to appoint that person without looking into those claims. That is impeachable. He purposely chose someone that there is credible information engaged in bias to cover up crimes for the Bidens as the special counselor. And when asked, well, when are we going to get to the bottom of it? He says, when Weiss finishes his investigation, he'll explain everything he did. When will that be? After the 2024 election? It's bad enough they let the statute of limitations run out. It's bad enough that they never investigated Joe Biden back in 2015 when he issued his quid pro quo for Burisma. It's bad enough they didn't do a thorough investigation in 2017. It's bad enough they didn't do it in 2019. It's bad enough they haven't done it since Biden's been there, since 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, where some of these crimes were approaching 8 years, and now we just got to wait more years for Weiss to investigate himself and explain himself. Enough is enough. It's time to impeach Merrick Garland. And it's time to hold these people account. Now, I'm not saying impeachment will solve everything, but it is clear by the testimony of Garland, he intentionally appointed someone that he refused to look into accusations from within this guy's own agency of corruption. And instead of looking into that, he appointed that guy and gave him even more power. All right, we recorded it. We did it. We back. Now, of course, when I bring this up, this is what the left's going to say. Oh, but you would have been upset if Garland would have investigated. You would have been upset if Garland got involved. Oh, if he wouldn't have appointed him special counsel. And what they're doing, they always do this clever sleight of hand, right? So like when Pisco's arguing, he sets it up. You go to the Twitter feed and see this for yourself. He sets it up as this binary. Either it was appoint Weiss special counsel or not appoint him special counsel. And Rob would have been furious if they didn't appoint a special counsel. The world doesn't exist in Pisco's binary choice there. The logical option would have been to appoint a special counsel that wasn't Weiss. Simple. Pisco's like, well, if Merrick Garland would have taken time to investigate these claims against Weiss and that occurred in the IRS FBI investigation into Hunter Biden, it would have delayed the process and Rob would have been mad about that. No need to delay. He could have either investigated as these accusations came up, which meant that the special counsel appointment could still have occurred in the same timeline that it did, or he could have appointed, since he chose not to investigate these accusations as they came up, he could have appointed a different special counsel and then investigated these accusations against Weiss and his team. I know this gets old to hear this, but let's put the shoe on the other foot. They demanded that Jeff Sessions recuse himself from the bogus Russia collusion investigation because Jeff Sessions was at a dinner or at some sort of event and there was a Russian there. That was enough to say, nope, Jeff Sessions must recuse himself. Imagine if Jeff Sessions says, fine, we're going to have this person look into it. They'll be the head task force. And imagine a bunch of whistleblowers within them goes, oh, they're looking into Trump-Russia collusion, but the guy leading it's leaving statute of limitations run out, and there are people tipping off the Trumps, and they're saying that for optics, we can't look into Donald Trump himself, and we can't talk to many people in the Trump orbit, and et cetera, et cetera. How do you think that would have went with Pisco and the rest of the left? What do you think they would have said? Do you think they would have been like, well, fair enough, Jeff Sessions said he wouldn't get involved, so we just have to let this guy go. And if it's until after the 2024 election, so be it. And if Sessions would have came out and been like, oh, okay, we're going to make this very guy that's been accused of covering up for the Trumps, now we're going to make him special counsel. So now no one else could look. This guy has total autonomy to how the investigation goes. You know exactly what all of the Democrats would have said. You know exactly. Again, they whined and gnashed their teeth and cried foul because Jeff Sessions talked to a Russian, therefore he must recuse. And Pisco asked questions like this on Twitter. Well, you think that Weiss should have been fired before it was proven that he did anything corrupt? No, I don't think he should be fired as if he should lose his job and lose his pension and things like that. I think he should be taken off the case, which seems entirely reasonable. No, Well, so if anyone ever says that someone's corrupt, they have to be taken off the case. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if credible people within his own agency have released information, much of it corroborated through contemporaneous notes, other sorts of proof that they've brought out, that it is the duty of the boss, in this case the Attorney General, to look into those accusations, or if he feels the need to have a special counsel, to appoint someone who's not involved in those accusations. Here's the question that they can't answer, and it is true. Weiss should have the ability to explain to the American people why these seeming discrepancies in how any other investigation, why was there a plea deal that was, in the words of Weiss himself, that he'd never seen the likes of when it came to giving it to Hunter Biden? Why did they allow the statute of limitations to run out? Is it true that someone in their office tipped off Hunter Biden before there was a search of his property? Is it true that they were told that they couldn't look into Joe Biden's property because it would be bad for optics? Weiss should have the ability to defend himself. Absolutely true. But until he does, he shouldn't be granted more power and total control over this investigation. But what if the left is wrong? What if people like Pisco are wrong? Pisco says, well, I haven't made up my mind yet. Let's see what Weiss has to say. That's what Garland's saying. Well, Weiss eventually will explain his actions. When? 2024? 2025? 2026? We're just going to leave him investigate in perpetuity? And then in 2025, once it no longer matters, they'll go, oh, well, that was a long time ago. What are we going to do now? Just like they always, just like with the Russia collusion stuff. Just like with the criminal FISA warrants that they got to spy on Trump's team. It happens in real time. I'm telling you it's happening. They say I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist. Turns out I was right, and what do they say? But that was a long time ago. Who cares? Just like Joe Biden's quid pro quo with Burisma. It was a long time ago. Who cares? But let's assume for a second that Pisco and the left are good faith, right? Let's assume, and they're saying, look, we just don't know. Maybe these IRS whistleblowers are onto something. Maybe there are reasonable explanations, and the IRS whistleblowers are either lying, or they just had a differing opinion, but it doesn't mean that it was immoral or biased or anything like that. There are credible explanations for why these actions occurred. We don't know. Let's assume that they really mean that. Okay, so let's say then that Weiss leads this investigation for another year, 2 years. The election comes and goes. Joe Biden wins or loses, whatever scenario. The investigation wraps up. And let's say this happens. Let's say in that investigation, they give Hunter Biden a slap on the wrist. They give him immunity for any other potential crimes he has. Hunter Biden takes the deal. He gets a fine. He's on probation for 6 months, etc., etc. And then Weiss comes in front of the American people, and his explanation is shit. He doesn't really have a good explanation. And people like Pisco and the Democrats, who are good faith in this scenario, in this world, I know, just humor me. I know they're not, but let's assume that they would say, geez, we find this explanation wanting. This is a very poor explanation. Seems that those IRS whistleblowers are right. It does seem like Weiss was someone who was actually trying to bury this investigation for the Bidens. Now what? Now what do we do? Now it's 2025. You can't retry Hunter Biden. He just signed immunity deals and plea agreements. So he's off the hook. Too late to do anything about Joe Biden. Now what? Oh, oops. Oh, well. What can you do? Oh, I guess we say Weiss can no longer do investigations. Whoopsie daisy. They don't have an answer for that. Now here's the truth. That would suit them just fine. That's absolutely perfect for them. That's exactly what they want. They don't want someone who might be independent, that's actually looking at this stuff for real. They don't care to do that. So they're absolutely fine. Again, who's going to investigate Weiss? Well, Weiss himself will investigate. He'll tell us when he wraps up. We don't know when that'll be, but he'll eventually get around to answering these IRS whistleblower claims, and he'll eventually get around to it. Just give him 3 or 4 years. He'll get there. And then if he was wrong, oh well, I guess, hindsight's 20/20. We can't do anything now. Always the case with these bootlicking, corrupt FBI defenders. when it's happening in real time. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see. Remember? Go back to the Devin Nunes memo. Remember that? Hashtag release the memo. Oh, that wasn't real people on Twitter that was making that one of the most tweeted things. That was Russian bots. Well, it turns out that was bullshit. But the memo that Nunes released, it's bullshit. It's all bullshit. They didn't use the Steele dossier to get a FICE warrant. They didn't do it. They confirmed things in the Steele dossier, but they didn't use it anyways. Nunes is full of shit. And then it turns out he wasn't. Nunes was absolutely right. And Adam Schiff with his counter memo that the left I was arguing with at the time was spreading over and over. Turns out Schiff was full of shit. Oh, well, it's over with now. What can you do? Comey's gone. What can you do? Peter Strzok isn't there anymore. Oh, well, no big deal. You even saw it when I debated Pisco on Erudite's channel the other day. He doesn't think it's a big deal that the FBI unlawfully spied on the President of the United States' team. He doesn't think that's a big deal. Do you think he'd think it was a big deal if it was Trump's team unlawfully spying on his political opponents using the FBI? You think he would have thought that was a big deal? Of course, that would have been impeachable. That would have been one of the most fascist abuses of power in the history of this country. But when it's the left doing it to Trump, no problem. No problem at all. Nonetheless, the important part here is Garland admitted, how can anyone defend this? Garland admitted, I'm aware of the accusations against Weiss. I purposely chose not to look into any of them, and yet I still appointed Weiss as the special counsel. How can anyone defend that? How could anyone? Again, these accusations wasn't like Tucker Carlson levied these accusations at Weiss. These were career IRS officials underneath Weiss, pointing out specific things that they were told they couldn't do, or specific things in the case that they thought were improper. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have Weiss be able to defend himself against these charges, but the idea that we have to appoint Weiss as the special counsel after he's been accused of this, and then wait until he wraps up the investigation for him to explain what happened, is nonsensical. And I assure you, when the other side, when it's the Democrats in charge, right, they're not this charitable. They're not like, well, I guess we'll leave Jeff Sessions remain as Attorney General till he wraps up the Russia collusion investigation. Then we'll have him explain himself. They're not that charitable. And by the way, remember, when Loretta Lynch was Attorney General and was meeting with Bill Clinton on the tarmac while her DOJ was investigating Hillary Clinton, she didn't even recuse herself. But Jeff Sessions was at a dinner that a Russian was at, so he had to recuse himself. Do you see? Say what you want about the Democratic Party, and by the way, the Rhino Republicans are just along with them there, but they know how to exercise and wield power. And their sycophantic cheerleaders, people like Pisco and people on the left, they absolutely know the game they're playing. They absolutely know the double standard, and they are 100% with it. They fully expect to be able to control the narrative, which most of the time they're able to, thanks to their mass control over social media and the corporations that run it, their mass control over the mainstream media, entertainment industry, all of these places that help shape our public narrative. They're able to formulate the narrative so that the average person gets their side of the story, and when the shoe's on the other foot, it doesn't occur. Let me give you an example in a non-corrupt sense of how this works. Do you remember when Trump was president and you had a Republican House and Senate, and Democrats were threatening to shut down the government because they didn't want to fund Trump's border wall? You remember that? Now, previously, when it was Obama and Republicans had threatened to shut down the government, I remember these leftists wailing and gnashing their teeth. Women won't be able to get their WIC subsidies. Children will starve to death. Healthcare won't occur. Government employees, noble government employees, they won't be paid. My God, our service people won't be paid. This is horrific. It's all because these Republicans, they hate these people. Jimmy Kimmel went on national television and cried, I have a daughter. My God, they're gonna take health care benefits away from the children. Their WIC benefits, they won't be able to have milk. Comedian Jimmy Kimmel. Then, when it was Republicans in charge and they were asking for money for things, and the Democrats were like, no, we're not going to sign off on that, and they were threatening to shut down, where was Jimmy Kimmel's tears? I don't remember that. I don't remember all of the narrative being, oh my God, Democrats are purposely punishing all of these career officials, people that work for the government, etc., etc. Don't remember that. Now we're back to Republicans are saying, well, we want line items. We want budgets on specific things. We're tired of, if we want to fund the woman who needs milk for her child, that we also have to fund, trans identifying programs in Afghanistan. Bullshit. That's what Matt Gaetz is pushing for. No, we'll fund each thing individually. Let's do that. And what's the narrative? You can see it all over the place today. Oh my God! No! All these people that need government money, they won't get it! And they get away with crafting that narrative because they have such control over the flow of the avenues through which our public discourse occurs. Same thing here with these sort of corruption investigations. Same thing. So it's not that Tucker Carlson said this or I said this. This is Merrick Garland's own words. Yes, I'm aware that there are accusations of corruption in Weiss's teams in their investigation into Hunter Biden, but I'm still going to appoint him as special counsel. That's it. That's impeachable. Not to mention the litany of other things Merrick Garland's done, but just on that alone. You don't have to rely on my claims. Go watch Merrick Garland's own words. At what level would Weiss have to be accused of something before Merrick Garland would have said, whoa, whoa, whoa? Like if Weiss was accused of planting drugs on Hunter Biden and then issuing a search warrant and finding the drugs, and we had whistleblowers say, we saw Weiss himself plant these drugs, would Pisco be out there saying, now, Merrick Garland can't get involved. Got to appoint Weiss special counsel now. Weiss will explain his actions 2 years from now when he wraps up his investigation. Of course not. That would have been something that would have been accused to be too hard on Biden. So the left would have been like, well, that accusation's serious. It needs to be looked into. Weiss can't be in charge anymore. But because Weiss is accused of slow-walking the investigation to benefit the Bidens, all of a sudden, no one could ever look into him. Nope. We just have to, however long it takes, if it takes 3-4 years and all the statute of limitations run out, oh well, we'll leave Weiss explain himself when it wraps up. Yeah, Garland's on the Supreme Court. He is so transparently terrible and biased and corrupt. It's unbelievable. Yeah, McCarthy sucks too. God bless Matt Gaetz for trying to hold his feet to the fire. But that's what one of my TikToks was on today. Again, you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to Merrick Garland himself. Just know this. Merrick Garland's the dude in charge. He thinks there's enough reason to appoint a special counsel, which means he thinks that he's saying to the American people, this needs to be an investigation outside the FBI, outside the Justice Department, outside the IRS, outside any employee that could be accused of bias that works under Joe Biden. Joe Biden is the executive. The IRS, the DOJ, the FBI, these are all agencies that he is the boss of. So Merrick Garland, for whatever reason, says, nope, we need a special counsel that's operating outside the scope of that. So who's he appoint? The very guy that, in his own words, he knows has been accused of corruption and chose not to look into it. What more needs said? Let's go to Canada, where an actual Nazi was standing ovation. Yay, Nazis! Woo! In Canadian Parliament. Now, there's a lot to say about this, but let me rain on everyone's parade to begin with. I don't think that the majority of the people applauding him knew that he was a Nazi. And let me go further than that. Let me steelman the opposition first. Does being in the SS necessarily mean that you're subhuman scum that's the worst person in the world that was gassing Jewish people and gay people and handicapped people? No, not necessarily. I know this is going to be there are different levels of this stuff. If you're just an average person who basically gets conscripted, or you have no choice but to join the military because there is a world war going on, you may have been fighting for an evil side, but that doesn't necessarily make you evil. Now, if you were someone who was running concentration camps and gassing people, that's different. And the I was just following orders shit doesn't fly. But in war, if you're just signed up and you're a frontline soldier, that could be different. I don't know the exact situation of this particular Nazi. I don't know. Nor do I believe that everyone applauding. If you haven't seen, what happened was this guy, Zelensky comes, Canada, just like the United States, is like, yay, we don't give a shit about our people. Just give more money to Zelensky and Ukraine and keep funding that war and keep the war machine going and people dying. You know, and Clinton Foundation will go in and they'll help rebuild Ukraine, and you know, all the arms companies are going to make a bunch of money, and BlackRock and a bunch of places, they'll help rebuild Ukraine, and yay, all the people that fund all of us phony baloney politicians, they're going to do really well, and then they'll give us funding, and yay, we get rich, and who gives a fuck if all of Ukraine is destroyed because of it? Meanwhile, they'll gaslight you and say, we care about Ukraine, you don't. By the way, who called this from the get-go? Who called it from day one? I said, I can tell you how this story ends. The people of Ukraine are fucked. That's how it ends. Just like the people of Afghanistan. That's how it ends. That a bunch of corrupt assholes in the first world will say, oh, we have a big heart, that's why we need to fund them. And at the end of the day, the people that will lose the most are the average Russian people and the average Ukrainian people. By the way, I have no love for Putin. I have no love for the government of Russia. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying that the West doesn't give a shit about the Ukrainian individual. They don't care. They didn't care in 2014 when Yanukovych was there. They didn't care when Poroshenko got brought in. They don't give a shit now that Zelensky's there. All they care about is how can they use this to entrench their own power. That's what it's about. And I said from day one that the way this ends is eventually, once all the smoke clears, the people of Ukraine are going to be fucked. And the West will have moved on to the next cause du jour. Just like Afghanistan. Same stuff. Seamlessly moved from sending all this money to Afghanistan to now we're sending it to Ukraine. Imaginarium says the guy was SS. It wasn't made up of conscript. They were ideologically devoted Nazis. Probably true, but I'm trying to steel man to give the benefit of the doubt. So that Zelensky was there, and they bring up this dude who was in the SS, and they're all going to cheer. Dex, thank you so much for the cheer, man. Really appreciate it. I really do. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who donates to me in any way. I really do. It's a humbling experience. And all of you that watch me, it really does mean a lot. It really does. Thank you. I should say thank you more often, but I really am humbled. I am. So thank you all. So let's just, for the sake of my argument, say, well, maybe this dude wasn't... Thank you so much, True Legend, for subscription. I really appreciate it. For the sake of argument, let's just say this wasn't... Okay, he's SS, that's bad, but maybe he wasn't, like, intentionally gassing innocent people. Okay? We'll go with that. The other thing is, politicians are like sheep. And, by the way, first off, as bad as most politicians are, corrupt or inept or cowardly... They're human, and I'll be honest with you. Let's say I go to a ball game, right? And they bring out a guy and say, this 93-year-old man fought in Ukraine against the communists in 1943. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause. I'd probably just instinctively be like, sure, great job, man. Fuck the commies. How much are you really thinking, like, wait a minute? Ukraine, 1943, fighting communists. Well, what groups do I know that would have been there fighting the communists? Was this guy just a partisan that was fighting? Like some rebel freedom fighter? Or, I don't know. I don't know. So, am I surprised that every politician clapped like a seal? Yay, war veteran. No. Do I think that means they were all like, oh yes, we know he was in the SS, we know he's an evil, terrible person, and we're still applauding? No, I don't think that. However, that's where my charitability ends. So I'm just being as charitable as possible to outline the situation. Here's where it becomes ridiculous. I'm not going to listen to the same people that say this is a white supremacy sign, that if I sing a song that someone in the Proud Boys sang at one time that I'm a Nazi, that if I think that there are biological sex is a reality, that I'm a Nazi, that if I vote for Donald Trump, that I'm a Nazi, I'm not going to listen to them make excuses for why they applauded for an actual Nazi. Now, first off, anyone with half a brain would know that the Russians, the Soviets in the 40s, were our allies. So if you're saying this guy fought the Soviets in World War II, if you have any historical knowledge whatsoever, which I assume you would have the bare minimum if you're in Parliament in Canada, wouldn't you say, oh, this guy fought our allies? Wouldn't that be where you would start? And I say this as someone who has no love for the Soviet Union. Thank you, True Legend. I really appreciate that, man. I do. So already it's like, you know, it would be like, we don't look at like Imperial Japan as terribly as we look at as the Nazis. But if they brought a man in front of Congress or Parliament in Canada or the United States and said, oh, here's this, you know, Canadian Japanese citizen, and in the 40s he fought for Japan against the Soviet, wouldn't bells ring in your head like, oh, he was our enemy in the 40s? That doesn't mean that necessarily you treat the guy like shit, but a standing ovation? Also, who was in charge of, you know, doing a little background check on this guy? They just happened to miss that? Oh, he was in the Waffen-SS. Just missed that one? I wonder what else they're missing all the time when they're telling us, put your Ukrainian flag in your bio. Oh my God, wear the Ukrainian flag pin. Yay! Wonder what else they're missing. Boy, I'm looking bald today. The greater thing that needs to be brought up, which hopefully this illustrates to the world, is there are literal Nazis today in Ukraine that we're funding. In the Azov Battalion, in the Tornado Battalion. Thank you so much, TLS. I really appreciate the sub. Thank you. Actual Nazis. Yeah, Imaginarium brings it up. Remember, they called the truckers protesting the lockdowns. Thank you, Shunt, for the follow. I really appreciate it. They called them Nazis. See, they're quick to call anyone who disagrees with their authoritarianism a Nazi. If you're a populist, you're a Nazi. If you go against the cultural narrative that's being shoved down your throat, whether that be actual authoritarian garbage like censoring people for opinions they don't like, or selective application of the law to go after people that they don't like, or protesting lockdowns and things like that, then you're a Nazi. But if you're an actual Nazi, well, now wait a minute. These guys aren't necessarily bad guys. This Waffen-SS guy, you know, and I saw this one PM today, Mike something, that was like, well, wait a minute, Canada did bad things in World War II as well, and blah, blah. Here's a guy that social media posts are rife with accusing people of being fascist or Nazis when they're out there talking about populist issues. You're a fascist, you're a Nazi, down with Nazis. But then when we have an actual Nazi in front of him, he's like, now wait a minute. Now that's different than applauding and saying, well, shit, I didn't know who he was, now I feel terrible. There are people literally defending it post hoc. We've known. You could go and you could find New York Times articles from 2014 about the Azov Battalion, the Tornado Battalion, etc. Literal Nazis. You can find articles from like last year or so where they're literally censoring the patches that are on some of these Ukrainian soldiers, the Black Sun and stuff like that. I can't tell you how many times I've been accused of being a Nazi for saying that we shouldn't be funding this Ukrainian war and should actually be trying to have a peaceful resolution. By people who are for sending money to battalions like the Azov battalions made up of actual Nazis. Now, I used to talk about this a lot. What does it mean when they're engaged in this obvious double standard? So in this case, they're like, Nazi, 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 Nazi. We have to reject all Nazis. But then, when there are literal Nazis, they're like, well, these Nazis are on our side, so... What does that mean? It means two things. It proves that they never cared about what they were talking about, but they knew you did. I don't fucking like Nazis. I know my audience doesn't like Nazis. So they know it's effective to normies to say, that's a Nazi talking point. That group is Nazis. What's his name? Youngkin, right? Current governor of Virginia. Remember when a left-wing group showed up and were like, yay, we like Glenn Youngkin, and pretended to be Nazis? Remember that? And it turned out it was a left-wing group. Why did they do that? Thank you, Lavin. Thanks for the subscription. Of course, Caligula. Of course that's what he was saying. They understand. See, the left-wing group, yes, part of that is the reason they went and they... Hype train coming? Thank you. Yeah, I can't see the hype train, but thank you so much. Keep the hype train going. Thank you. Why did they do that? Yes, part of it's to speak to their base. But the reason they did that to Youngkin was they wanted to inspire people that were undecided to say, look how dangerous. Look at the dangerous people that are connected here. Now, if you actually gave a shit about Nazis, you wouldn't belittle it by dressing up as a Nazi and falsely accusing someone of being a Nazi just for cheap political points. So they didn't give a shit, but they knew that the average person did. They know the average person correctly finds Nazis to be despicable, as they should. Right. Imaginarium says, that's a great point. Did you ever hear the leftist argument, if there are 10 people at the table and one of them are Nazis, there are 10 Nazis? Right. Does it apply to the left? Well, that's different. You see, the Azov Battalion, when they're Nazis, it's just a cultural thing. It's just them ironically wearing Nazi iconography. That's all. That's different. They don't give a shit about Nazis. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a shit. They were pro-Soviet Union and pro-communist when it benefited them. Now it benefits them to say Russians are subhuman and that Russia's the most evil place in the world. So they'll completely do a 180 and be like, oh, Nazis are fighting Russians? Great, Nazis are great. That's great. They're not real Nazis. They don't give a shit. If they thought that it could win them political points to literally just be like, yep, we cheer for Nazis now. That's what they would do. The only reason they're backtracking now is because they're afraid that the average person would be like, whoa, wait a minute. The left is supporting Nazis? So they'll support the Nazis. They really are supporting the Nazis that exist today in Ukraine. They really are supporting them. They just have to make excuses. But they don't give a shit. They're more than happy. They never gave a shit about supporting Nazis. They don't care. They don't care at all. They will support the most vile, disgusting people in the world. They don't give a fuck. They'll support horrible communists when it benefits them, and if the next day it doesn't benefit them, they'll say anyone who supports the communists are the worst, most evil people in the world. They don't give a shit. Kids in cages are bad when it's Trump, but they're not bad when it's Obama or when it's Biden. They don't give a shit, but they know you do. That's why they use it. They don't give a shit about racism. They're racist. They don't give a shit. They exploit black people. They exploit minorities. They don't give a shit about these people. But they pretend to because they know the average person doesn't like racism. So they pretend to give a shit about it. Now, while destiny is a topic of conversation, let me say this. I have no love for what I see as the political manipulation and cultural manipulation that radical members of the trans community are attempting to enact. In all sorts of reasons. I've defended biological reality. I've talked about my problems that I have with the politicization that we see in the trans movement, such as biological males competing against women in sports, the forcing of education of children, etc., etc. I've talked about all this shit at great length. However, I've also, when I've engaged with members of the trans community, have tried to use language that was beneficial to facilitating a conversation, as long as I was being reciprocated with kindness. I don't have a problem with that. Despite that, you can see how oftentimes even the people that I've done that with, such as Tiffany Starr, have just been unhinged lunatics that seek to get me canceled, etc. But, let me say this. As someone who the biggest example of me arguing these trans issues was because the editor of Destiny selectively edited me, which got me on the top page of Reddit to make it seem like I was conceding to some point Destiny had on trans issues, when in actuality it was the exact opposite. I went into this discussion with Destiny saying trans is an illness, most likely a mental illness, but there is a chance with some people it is a physical illness. Either you think your brain's in the wrong body, which is a mental illness, or your brain legitimately is in the wrong body, which is a physical illness. Therefore, we shouldn't cancel people that say that trans is an illness. That was my position the entire discussion. However, the editor made it selectively seem like, oh, Rob's conceding to Destiny's point now because he gave some ludicrous hypothetical that I generously answered. Lesson learned. Whoever has the biggest audience and the best editor can make it seem like anything they want. But I digress. I didn't understand how anyone who watched that debate could come out thinking that Destiny was more positive to the trans community than me. For one simple fact. The trans community might not like what I have to say. Absolutely fine. I don't disparage a trans person, though. Just like I don't disparage anyone else that has an illness. I could be friends with a trans person. It's a lot like vegetarianism. I have friends that are vegetarians that are never throwing the shit in my face. I have no problem with that. But if you're going to sit there and yell at me every time I'm eating a cheeseburger, fuck off. Same thing. I could be friends with a trans person, wouldn't give a shit at all. Start being an asshole about it and demanding I do certain things, that's a different issue. Literally, my job is working with people with illnesses. I don't treat people like shit because they have some sort of illness. But not Destiny. Destiny, in that debate I had, said, I identify as non-binary. So I'm sort of trans. And why did he say he does that? So that he has armor against trans people when he's arguing against them. In other words, he's pretending to be trans to win an online political argument. Now, you in the trans community might say, well, fuck Rob, I disagree with his opinions. But at least I'm not exploiting your situation for personal gain for myself, like Destiny was admitting to doing. That's what he was doing. Same thing here. Hashtag believe all women. Oh, unless they accuse people that we like. Then, wait a minute. They accuse Joe Biden, that's different. They accuse Bill Clinton, that's different. They accuse Bob Menendez, that's different. My stance is quite simply, we should take accusations seriously, but we should also have to mix that in with giving people the benefit of the doubt that they're innocent until proven guilty. You might not like that if you're a big woman's activist that believes hashtag believe all women. But at least I'm consistent. Listen to Rose McGowan talk about it. Fuck these lefties, she says. They're fake. They pretend to care about women, but they intentionally cover up when it's people that share their cultural or political ideations that are accused. Then they cover up for it. That's worse. That's infinitely worse. Same thing I'm talking about with that. You care about trans issues, but you also exploit the situation to benefit yourself. Same with this Nazi shit. They don't give a shit about Nazis. They don't care. They are belittling what an actual Nazi is by watering down the term to accuse anyone that they disagree with politically of being a Nazi. Remember, this goes way back. I mean, this was before I was even live streaming. I was on blog posts talking about this. Is it okay to punch a Nazi? No! Why? Well, because even if people have ideologies that you despise, you do not get to preemptively enact physical violence upon them. If they're physically attacking you, absolutely, that's self-defense. But you don't get to physically attack people and assault people because you don't like their ideas. That's what free speech is about. There are tons of people whose ideas I think are horrific and terrible. I don't get to go around punching them. No. But the other reason is, if we say, yes, it's okay to punch a Nazi, then the left says, okay, and everyone I disagree with is a Nazi. That's how they explain you're awful. We can do whatever we want to you. Government censoring you? Good. You're evil. You're a Nazi. FBI breaking down people's houses? Great. You're a Nazi. You fucking had it coming. You're a racist. Azov are Nazis. They wear Nazi iconography. They celebrate actual Nazis. I understand Nazi defenders like yourself, Justice 35, will seek to deflect from these actual Nazis. No doubt you're probably calling people Nazis that are doing things like giving the OK sign and stuff like that. Well, just because they celebrate Nazis and they trace their lineage back to the Nazis that fought the Soviets and they wear the symbols of Nazis doesn't make them Nazis. Now, you people that are out there, you know, cheering for Trump, you're an actual Nazi. I don't know the first thing. It's funny. Care to call in? You call in another night if you want. They're not actual Nazis. I mean, it's not like they're alive now while Hitler's alive. The Azov Battalion was founded in 2014 by white supremacist Andrei Beletsky, who advocated a crusade of the white nations of the world against the Semitic-led subhumans. The organization is teaming with fascists and racists who idolize Stepan Bandera, whose organization of Ukrainian nationalists collaborated with Nazis during World War II in carrying out the Holocaust in Ukraine. Bandera's forces also engaged in an ethnic mass murder of tens of thousands of Poles. Today, monuments to him have been erected throughout Ukraine, and the fascist slogan, Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine, is regularly used by Western politicians. The Ukrainian Student Association at Stanford has adopted its official logo, which is also used to designate officers of the Ukrainian Hilspolizei under the Nazis. They wear the black sun and other Nazi iconography. If you want to get in a nuanced discussion about, well, technically these people aren't Nazis, I'm willing to concede that it theoretically could be possible that by the strict definition they're just Nazi sympathizer, far-right fascist, that technically themselves aren't Nazi. It'd be like saying, well, the skinheads aren't the KKK. But people that want to say giving the OK sign, or the Proud Boys, or Trump supporters, or the trucker convoy people are Nazis, don't get to then claim, oh, well, these aren't real Nazis just because they support Nazis and wear Nazi symbols, etc., etc. Please stop saying the black sun and runes and stuff are Nazi. That you don't think they are? Is this like the people that say, well, actually, the swastika isn't a Nazi symbol. The swastika was a Hindu symbol that they turned around. So if you see someone in your town with a swastika, well, don't say that that's Nazi. Don't say that's associated with Nazism. It could very well be a Hindu. Is this guy calling in? Happy to do it. Get the call set up here. We'll continue. Yeah, I saw that. So they're blaming Russian disinformation. Now the key is, right? Right. That Aftershock makes the point here. Yeah, pull him in when he joins. That's fine. Just let me know when he joins. I have my headset ready. The same people, again, that want to accuse, oh, you gave this symbol? That's a Nazi symbol. That's white supremacy. You voted for Trump, that's white supremacy. You're in the trucker convoy, that's white supremacy. But groups wearing actual Nazi symbols that were founded by a guy saying, we need to remove the Semites and, for the glory of the white race, etc., etc. Well, wait a minute. Those technically aren't Nazis. That's different. That's a different situation. Let's parse out. Let's go through history and say, well, these people may have celebrated the Nazis or they're Nazi adjacent, but technically not Nazis. Technically not. The point I'm making here is that what this situation illustrates, where we actually have Canadian Parliament members applauding an actual Nazi, the real lesson to take is they don't give a shit about actual Nazis. They'll accuse you of being a Nazi, not because they give a shit about Nazis, but because they know that the average person does. So they'll accuse people that they disagree with of being Nazis so that they can silence them, root them out, silence their political opposition. And then when people that are actual Nazis or are far closer to actual Nazis, they'll suddenly, well, we have to finance them, we have to support them. It's just all performative. I'll believe it when I see it when this guy comes into the chat. Yeah, Judah, and I've seen these clips, so we saw them all back in 2014, 2017, 2019. All of these mainstream media sources and sort of extremist sources, that are looking into extremism around the world, they were all saying what a problem the Azov Battalion was. All of their connections to Nazis and stuff like that. That's what they were saying. Now it's changed. Now it's, well, wait, technically they're not Nazis. Oh, there we go. All right, Just Ice. You hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. So the Azov Battalion aren't Nazis. That's your claim.
Oh, you're good or no?
You sound fine.
Okay.
So your claim is
the Azov Battalion are Nazis?
Correct. You're saying they're not. Go for it.
The Azov Battalion, as it stands now, are Nazis.
Yes, that is an argument that I am making. Correct.
Okay. So the Azov Battalion, which is a part of the main Ukrainian army, are Nazis.
That is correct. That is what I'm saying. That the Azov Battalion was founded by a white nationalist who intentionally uses.
No.
You've asked 3 times what my position is, so I'm going to clarify. They were founded by a white nationalist. They use Nazi iconography. They celebrate Nazis. They were condemned as Nazis and Nazi adjacent by most mainstream organizations prior to this war.
Before this war.
Correct.
So, after the war, when, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but Azov Battalion has a lot of Jewish members. They're nationalists, but they're not ultra-nationalist. They are part of the main Ukrainian forces, so the makeup of Azov isn't even the same before the war. So you're telling me that with all that information, you're still going to say that the Azov Battalion are Nazis?
Okay, so let's take these claims one by one. Your first claim is if there are Jewish people that claim they're in the Azov Battalion, that proves that they can't be Nazis or connected to Nazis, correct?
No. What I'm saying is that your argument is that the Azov Battalion are Nazis based off of data before the war. The Azov Battalion, by the way, the Azov Battalion, in quotation marks, is actually now a mainline unit in the Ukrainian army. So the makeup isn't even the same.
Okay.
So you're arguing for a pre-war unit.
So I like what we do. So you make claims to cast doubt on what I'm saying, and then as I then try to go through your claims one by one, you deny making the claims and then move because you see how flimsy your claims are. So the first thing you said was the makeup is different now. Now there are Jews in it, therefore it can't be Nazis. That's your claim 1, right?
No, my claim 1
is that if you can't logically follow your own argumentation, I don't know how fruitful this conversation would be. Right? So, did you or did you not say, let's take claim 1 out. Did you say one of your reasonings were that there are Jewish people in the Azov Battalion, which is evidence that they're not Nazis?
Well, you just want the yes answer, so you can go on your next ramble. So go ahead.
So, your answer is yes?
Well, no, you want me to give the yes answer.
No, I want to hear. I listen to you make claims that dispute what I say. Then I'm going to try to deal with those claims one at a time. You will not honestly answer to what your claims were because you know how dumb your claims are. Now, if you were interested in a good faith conversation, you would say, yes, that is one of the things I said. But instead, you're not interested. So you're saying, oh, geez, he's going to answer me. So now I won't say, yes, that is one of the claims I made. Which lets us all know right out of the gate that you're not interested in a good faith conversation. Now, I'll try again. Was one of your arguments that the Azov Battalion can't be Nazis because there are Jewish people in it?
No.
Okay. We'll see you later.
All right.
Yeah. Not wasting my time. Of course, he knows what the answer would be. Well, then I could say the KKK is not racist if I could point to a black person in it. Or if Enrique Tarrio was the leader of the Proud Boys and he's a person of color, then clearly it can't be a racist organization. It is a nonsensical claim. Now, it might cast suspicion on the motivations of an organization if they have many prominent members of color and you're calling them racist, but it's certainly not dispositive. In general, his argument was going to be as follows. Oh, well, the Azov Battalion, yes, I'm not disputing all of the things you say about them historically, that they wore Nazi iconography and that they, celebrated Nazi causes, were founded by white nationalists, but that was the old Azov. Now the new Azov is part of the Ukrainian military, and their battalion also includes different people. Yes, that's absolutely true. It's not dispositive, though, that the Azov Battalion were made up of Nazis and they're still there. It's just now that they realize their bread is being buttered by an international community that has paid lip service for years to Nazis are terrible, that they have to try to distance themselves from that. That's why we see organizations, I think it was Time Magazine that was doing a photo shoot, had to politely ask them to please remove the black sun and all of that other stuff, because they're crafting this narrative for the world. Oh, this is the new, imagine, who was it that did, I think it was Mr. Show, used to have this skit, the new and improved KKK. Now this KKK, sure, it's the old KKK was bad, but the new KKK, we accept black people, we're great now. The idea that they're now trying to distance themselves is nonsensical. If they truly were repentant of their Nazi roots, they would say, we're not going to call ourselves the Azov Battalion. We're going to completely disband. We will now enter a new arrangement with the military of Ukraine, not calling ourselves the Azov Battalion. Oh, Casimir's in the waiting room? Who's Casimir's great. What's up, Casimir? I didn't notice you there.
Hey, I just showed up.
Yeah, so we're talking Azov Battalion. I don't know if you have anything...
Yeah, I do. So I think it's like a distraction, intentionally so, red herring. So notice how it's always Azov. Why don't they mention right sector?
The Tornado Battalion's another one.
Yeah, well, Tornado, but right sector in particular. So right sector, they have videos of their leaders where they openly say that they're going to benefit from this conflict by receiving weaponry. They plan to become the most well-armed group in the region, and then when the war is over, they're going to dominate. And like they have, public talks where they're discussing their plans. So in fact, their plans are not different from every other radical organization that the United States has ever supported and then had to fight, a few decades later.
Well, right. Well, that's the story of the West getting involved in these conflicts, just like supporting the Mujahideen. But the point I'm trying to make, the reason I bring up the Azov Battalion, is that it is the public face of weak. No doubt there are more blatant far-right extremist groups and racial groups in Ukraine. But the argument could always be pleaded of ignorance. Well, the Canadian Parliament doesn't know about that. The average congressperson in the United States doesn't know about that. What I'm bringing up is the point is that the left never gave a shit about Nazis. When they were saying it's okay to punch a Nazi, or Trump supporters are Nazis, or the Proud Boys are Nazis, or the truck convoy are Nazis. Just like every other time that they engage in a double standard, what they're really doing is admitting to you two things. One, they never gave a shit about what they were pretending to. But second, they know that normal people do. So for example, they don't give a shit about women that are victims of sexual assault. You know how I know they don't? Because as soon as a prominent person on their side, like Joe Biden's accused or Bill Clinton's accused, all of a sudden hashtag believe all women's out the window. So they never really gave a shit about that. But the reason they say that they do is because they know the average person does. So the average person correctly despises Nazis. So they just take that to say everyone we disagree with is a Nazi. Trump supporters are Nazis. The Proud Boys are Nazis. The trucker convoy is Nazis, right? And you have to condemn all Nazis. No ground given. But then when we have these groups that at least you can see were founded on Nazi principles and Nazi iconography and all of this shit, they're like, well, that's different. We need to have a very nuanced look. Sure, maybe they were Nazis in 2018, but they've since reformed. That's why I bring up the Azov Battalion in this situation. I don't even think they're the most blatant example of Nazis in Ukraine, but it's the example that everyone knows. And to listen to all these left-wing politicians and their left-wing followers, like that guy that just called in, sit here and have this very nuanced discussion. Well, when we're arming and funding these Nazis, technically they're not Nazis. They were just founded on white nationalism that hated Jewish people, that celebrated Nazis, but now there's a couple Jewish people in it, so it's all cool. Meanwhile, you're a Nazi because you voted for the guy we didn't like.
No, yeah, of course. It's always just a pure Schmittian friend-enemy distinction with them, which is very Nazi-like in fact. and so yeah, they're completely blind to all of these absolute like symmetry breakers, and they don't care. So I agree with you. I don't like. I think it's really funny though because of how documented this issue is. I remember watching, Weiss News back when they were reporting during, from 14 and onwards. They were with all of those groups, and they were saying how these groups are, have so many radicals in them, and they started whitewashing those groups even back then, but they couldn't just get the job done. And then the website I linked to is very useful if you want to like look into the various groups. They used to track them before this war, and they would like tell you, here are all of these radical groups, here are how people move between them, and it used to be done by the same NGOs that now support Ukraine and now work together with these organizations. It's really, really funny.
Right, and that's just it. Now, listen, me and you, like if you were to call in and say, now, Rob, be careful, actually calling the Azov Battalion Nazis is a little wrong, because I'm not saying they're a good group, but if you look at this historically and with a very nuanced lens, I'm willing to listen to you say that, because I know you're not the type of person that is smearing everyone you disagree with as a Nazi, right? And so you're willing to listen to people based on sort of what their worldview is and how they've utilized that in having discussions. What you're saying is the critical point. Like, for example, I'm reading an article right now from Foreign Policy, right? The magazine Foreign Policy from 2014, talking about the Nazi Azov Battalion in 2014, right? And all of these groups that you're mainstream media groups and these like anti-extremist groups that were calling the Azov Battalion Nazi or Nazi adjacent for years, right? To now listen to them be like, well, wait a minute. Now it's different because they're benefiting us politically. They're going along with sort of the political policies that we want. That's what I can't accept. I can't accept the people that want to call everyone Nazis and say that they ought to be silenced or punched, physically attacked, or shunned from society, then say that my tax dollars must be taken and given to groups that literally call themselves Nazis, and then say, well, wait a minute, it's time to take a nuanced look at these groups. That, to me, is what's unforgivable, and I think that more people need to understand. It's not a double standard on my part. Just like, for example, I don't believe the narrative #BelieveAllWomen. I believe that accusations should be taken seriously, but we also should be innocent until proven guilty. And so I've defended. I didn't think Al Franken should have to resign. I didn't think Bob Menendez should have had to resign when he was accused of paying underage hookers. I said they should be treated innocent until proven guilty, given a chance to defend themselves. However, what we see from the radical left is they want to weaponize that into any person, in this case today, like Russell Brand, weaponize it against him, but then as soon as it comes to prominent people that would affect them politically, like Joe Biden going down, they're like, well, that's different. We don't believe all women there. That's what I find unforgivable. If you have always been the type of person that's like, look, I believe at looking at each individual case and trying to come up, I don't believe in something as stupid as believe all women, so I try my best to parse through each case, I'm willing to listen to that. I'm willing to listen to you say, this is why I think Russell Brand's worse than Joe Biden. Thanks, Average.
The Russell Brand case is very interesting because, I'm not going to delve into it, probably because I just don't care enough. But I find it incredibly funny. So there's a whole bunch of logical forks in that case. So one of them is, I mean, at face value, if something happened to you, and then you remain silent for 20 years, then there's a problem where, the problem of convenient allegations. The allegations show up when there's blood in the water. Then the allegations show up and they pile in with like lawyers, with ambulance chaser lawyers. However, somebody might say, well, listen, here's all the evidence where he was guilty like all of those years ago, or at least they were trying to prove his guilt all of those years ago, but he was being protected by various people. And so finally he's getting his comeuppance. Here's the evidence, Some people are doing that right now. What about all of those people? So the allegation now is that it has been covered up. By whom? Why are they not, quote unquote, in the same jail cell as him?
Right.
Like, I think the covering up, if you allege that there was evidence and somebody was covering it up for 10 or more years, who are those guilty parties? They're actually more dangerous than Russell Brand. They did something worse than what Russell Brand allegedly did. And they are completely out of the picture.
Well, and that I agree 100%, right? And that's what I will admit, there's so much going on in the world. The specifics of the Russell Brand case, I haven't delved into much. But my take on it is, it's always who the people controlling the narrative want to go after that they'll go after. For example, take someone like Howard Stern that was out there criticizing Laura Boebert. We could see, like, the shit that he said. Like, he said after Columbine, he didn't understand why the shooters didn't basically rape or have sex with the girls before he shot them. He used to have people call onto his show that he wasn't age-checking women, that he would tell to put let's just say he would tell them to commit sexual acts so he could audibly hear the results, right?
Come on! You just said his name. And everybody that knows him knows, not to listen to the guy. The guy is a pornographer.
Right.
He has women, strip on his show and masturbate on air. Who cares what he says?
Well, that's just it.
He's even a part of the conversation.
I agree, but the reason I bring it up is, where are the accusations against him? Where are all the groups that are saying, mistreatment of women? He's still part of the conversation because he has the correct politics. Russell Brand, 99% chance, would have never been came after if he was out there saying Trump's horrible, wear your mask, take your vaccine. But it's because he has become a prominent figure that is questioning the establishment narrative. Now he's fair game. Now all these investigators will go after. And what you said is the key point. If it's true, right, that he did this, then what about the people, he worked in mainstream entertainment. All of these people, the article says everyone knew that if you went on his show, it was super uncomfortable, but they were all silent. No one said shit until it became politically expedient. And it reminds me, I don't know if you remember seeing this, but when Ronan Farrow broke the Harvey Weinstein thing, remember there was this footage of this one anchor from one of the news networks, and the camera was rolling, but they weren't live on the air, and the footage has been released, where she's basically cursing shit, we had this story 2 years ago, and the executives at NBC wouldn't let me run it. Yeah. What about that? What about all of those people in the traditional media that's oh yeah, we knew about this for years, we knew about it, but we were just told to lay off the story. When are they going to be held accountable? And the truth is, it's only when it becomes politically expedient that these people are held accountable. Now, it could be entirely true that Russell Brand did what he's accused of. I don't know. But what I do know is this. If we're willing to accept a world when powerful organizations and the people that actually run the world are allowed to take down, just based on accusations, people that are critical of them, and allowed to protect people that are accused, that are siding with them, then inevitably that process will be exploited to entrench power with them. And that's exactly what we're seeing. If you, for example, Casimir, ever get a voice, all of a sudden you're pulling Joe Rogan numbers, you're streaming every night, and you're criticizing sort of statism and the evils of government and things like that, and these accusations are levied at you, how will you protect yourself? You'll be found guilty until innocent, even though you've never done any of these heinous things. But they could they could assassinate your name, and you literally have no recourse.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing is there's this cultural angle also. It used to be a very common joke, and it was covered by, I forgot the comedian's name, but there's many comedians covered this idea, and it's the idea that if you were successful in like the early in basically in any era, but particularly in like the era of MTV and so the opening up of entertainment in the early 2000s and the 90s, like you had to brush away sex offers from groupies left and right.
Mm-hmm.
So like the idea that any of these men required like sexual assault to get any form of satisfaction is absolutely ridiculous. It's preposterous. They had to fight, women off of themselves because they were rich, they were powerful, they were popular, and many of them at the time were good looking. And this is actually what they caught Trump on tape talk about this. How
yes,
these loose women. He wasn't talking about all women. He was talking about a particular type of woman who approaches stars, grabs their hand, and shoves it, their hands in her own skirt.
Mm-hmm.
And then 20 years later, suddenly becomes, a victim with an ambulance-chasing lawyer.
I mean, it's like the Weinstein. Now, listen, let's be clear here. There's parsing out of things, even in that world. Physically holding someone down and raping them, not acceptable. But you're right. What you're talking about is that, right, we have changed the definition of consent. Consent is now whatever is convenient for the woman. For example, it is widely considered that a woman who is drunk can't consent. Well, what about a guy? What if a guy and woman are both drunk? Is it rape from both of them? Well, we only look at it from the perspective of the woman. She couldn't consent because she was inebriated, right? And basically, there used to be this woman I used to listen to named Karen Strawn that talked about this, and she would use sort of entertainment. So she would use like romance novels, which I've never read, but the ones I'm talking about that'll have like Fabio on the cover, and she's like here's
You don't need a romance novel. It was a common knowledge that women would go to bars and would get drunk, and the idea of going to bars was the version of Tinder and hookup culture. And if you're doing that, and it's preposterous, it's ridiculous to say that you were not in control. Yes, in the moment when she's inebriated, she's not in control, but she was in control knowing what would happen and actively seeking that type of culture and seeking that type of club or the type of bar for the hookup scene. And then people wake up with a hangover a day later and they suddenly have regrets. And the regrets don't come from the actual act. They will consent to it a day later under similar circumstances. The regret comes from the fact that they're living a hedonist life, that they have nobody respects them and they have no future. That's what they're regretting in those moments. And then they map it into the evil man. And yeah, the man is like also of low moral character to even be hanging around those places. So it's all like it's all a little bit icky and disgusting, and these are our heroes, quote unquote, in society.
Well, and what I was saying about the romance novel thing is, what Karen Strawn's saying is, it used to be sexual assault or rape was prior consent. So before the act took place was consent given. And now the definition has been changed to post-consent. Did you like the act? And so she says, I think it was the case of Aziz Ansari, who I'm not a big fan of, but you remember the allegation against him was basically just a woman hooked up with him and didn't like the act. Didn't think that he performed well on their date or in the sexual acts that they took. So she complained about it later and said, well, it was post hoc. There was consent at the time, but because she didn't like it, she was like, no, I was a victim. Meanwhile, if you look at these romance novels, it'll be a clear case of rape. A pirate takes over a ship that a woman's on and ravages this woman. But then they fall in love, and it's like, oh, it's no big deal, because the act was good. She liked the act. So even though she didn't give consent priorly, they have redefined what consent means. Consent is no longer the act occurred. And again, I'm making an exception for literal rape and things like that, but look at the Harvey Weinstein case. No doubt there were a bunch of women that knew the accusations about Weinstein, and it's untoward, and I think it's immoral and disgusting, and it's not something I would engage in, but it's not rape to be like, I'm this kind of fat, ugly producer that could make you a star, but you're going to perform me sexually, and you say, okay, I'll do that. And what you see is women did that. They became stars. They knew other women were doing that. And then 20 years later, they were like, I'm a victim. So they got all the benefits of, they got the benefits when it helped them and helped their career. And I'm not saying they should have to do that. I would prefer a meritocracy where the best actresses rose to the top because they were great at their craft. But unfortunately, that's not the way our system works. And if you're going to play this game where you're trading your body as sexual currency to help your position, it seems a little unethical to then 20 years later, now that the stakes, you no longer could lose your career. In fact, you only will benefit now from your career to come out and claim the victim.
Yeah, and then nobody returns the trophies and gives the trophies to all the other women that didn't do that and had a slower career growth as a result. Like those are the real victims in the situation, the people who stayed, more ethical and more moral in the situation. And I think it's really funny how they had this whole Me Too thing, and then it was a fad that disappeared, but the situation in Hollywood did not change. It is going to be the same situation. There's going to be other people that will take his place. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the man himself is back in a position of power fairly rapidly if he doesn't get like a harsh conviction or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he has to feel like, I'm just doing what everyone else was doing. Why was I singled out? Well, because he ran afoul of certain people in positions of power. That's why he was singled out, right? Doesn't mean that he's a good man or anything like that. But I would understand him being like, this is how everyone did it. And you're absolutely right. This, to me, it's someone I respect who I would disagree with, but I respect is Rose McGowan. Rose McGowan was like, fuck all these people. None of these people that are out there going, yay, me too, none of them give a shit. They're just doing it because it's the cause du jour right now, and it gets them clicks on social media, and people pat themselves on the back and say, yes, we're such good people, but they don't give a shit about the victims. They only give a shit right now because it's culturally and politically expedient to do so. And to me, that's worse. To me, Rose McGowan might say, well, fuck Rob. He doesn't really delve into accusations against people like Russell Brand or delve into accusation against people like Al Franken. He just takes this bullshit, hey, innocent until proven guilty, but he doesn't really investigate as much as he should. That could be a fair criticism from her perspective. But if I was her, would say, but that's still better than the people that claim to care about this shit, but only when it personally benefits them. Only when they could make politically... To me, that's more insulting. And that's, to me, the reason I got on this was this Nazi thing with the Canada, right? Like, it is more... If I was Jewish, or if I had someone that was killed by actual Nazis in my family lineage, I would be fucking more infuriated by the left that are watering down the term Nazi by claiming anyone they disagree with is a Nazi, but then patting them on the back and funding them when they find it politically expedient. That, to me, is more offensive exponentially because it proves they don't give a fuck. They don't care about Nazis. They just care about the power of attacking their political opponents. And I think that's the part that no one ever gets. It's that, yes, they don't give a shit, but it's also that they know that the average person does give a shit. You care. You don't want to be associated with Nazis. You hate Nazis. I hate Nazis. That my neighbor that doesn't give a shit about politics that runs a farm, he fucking hates Nazis. And so when you hear, oh boy, Nazis support that candidate, that's really bad. That's what the left knows. They know that they can exploit that natural, real reaction in people, but they actually don't give a fuck. They're more than happy to buddy up with Nazis if it helps them politically.
It's also a big distraction from, like, a lot of the topics that are making the airwaves are a distraction from what's actually going on. And what's going on was, like, in the Ukraine in particular, was quite bizarre because the people who spent the last year fighting against the Russian invasion, the majority of them were, I would say, ethnically were probably Russian. Probably more Russian than Ukrainian. Probably spoke Russian most of their lives. Just didn't want to be under Putin's regime. And also sort of were normies who didn't really track the propaganda as much. And so they became the cannon fodder in this war that could have been over in April, could have been over a little bit later. There were many attempts to end it, but the war goals do not consider their lives important. People on panels. I was on on an after show panel where people asserted that their main goal is like the destruction of Moscow and the toppling of Putin's regime. Now, I would want that to happen. I would want Putin's regime to to be replaced by something better, but we don't get that guarantee. We might get replaced with something worse. Also, that's not supposed to be part of the war goal. That's like something completely different and a much more difficult task. And the war goal is supposed to be, let's end this conflict with as much security as we can have. And somehow we were promised that, listen, the only way we can get security is if Russia collapses. But it's not happening. And the irony is that it's not the Nazis who were in most of these combat units that were dying. The groups who are more sympathetic to the Nazis are on the European side of the country, and for the longest time they could evade the draft, or they could easily cross the border and move out for Europe and other countries. But yet now, when Ukraine is running out of troops, these people get increasingly caught and conscripted and sent back to fight. And so now you will find more of them in the combat battalions. But I don't know, this whole...
Yeah, I don't disagree, right? Like, I don't claim, unlike other people that you'll see, I don't claim to be an expert on much. I am basically a fucking redneck, right, who happen to be a reasonable debater that as a hobby looks into shit. I have a worldview that I think is coherent, and I'm able to look at situations based on that worldview that I think's coherent and I'm able to articulate. But I don't claim to be an expert. In fact, I'm poorly... so I don't read as much as I should there. Let's put it that way. But what I do know is that the people in our country and the people in the West that are making these decisions, they don't give a fuck about the Ukrainian people. They didn't give a fuck about the Afghani people. They didn't give a fuck about the Libyans. They don't give a shit about the Syrians. They don't give a fuck. And it's not just a simple, well, you're just taking an easy worldview. No, it's that they've shown us that over and over and over and over and over again. They've showed that when they are selective in their outrage. They are selective when they say, national sovereignty matters. On one hand, they'll invade Syria and they'll bomb Syria. And then on the other hand... go ahead.
I'll give you a better example. I think a really good example to show them that I was recently reminded of is Turkey. So Turkey is not just some other country. Turkey is one of the primary members of NATO, and very close to the European Union, and is a member alongside their enemy Greece. And Turkey attacked and is currently occupying half of Cyprus, where it performed population transfers and other atrocities. Well, the Greeks did as well. And so now it is legally occupying the lands of a European Union nation while being a member of NATO. And at the same time, it's also conducting military operations in Syria that sometimes clash with American interests. So they're allowed to do all of this, fairly aggressive action. And it's very likely that in the near future, they might, I'm talking about next 50 years, they might even quit NATO and join various Chinese alliances, and they might even attack Greece. The risk of it is so significant that France signed an agreement with Greece to give them, contract-based protection. If Greece ever gets attacked by Turkey, France joins the fray. That's why it's not happening yet. So this situation is allowed to happen, and yet, if the idea that Russia should keep Crimea is wild. It's like a wild claim in the same circles.
Right.
The idea that we can't take it back by force, and the atrocities there already happened. People already left there, so there's no way back.
There's just there's no consistency, right? You're absolutely right. your situation with Turkey, absolutely, I have to look into this, but absolutely is more of an apples to apples comparison. But the situation with Turkey that I talk about a lot involves Syria, right? So we got involved in Syria to fight ISIS, which meant that we had to partner with al-Nusra and al-Qaeda to fight ISIS, but simultaneously we're also bombing Assad while we're there, who's also fighting ISIS, we're told. And one of our allies there are the Kurds. But now we're told we can't leave Syria because Turkey, who we're in a military alliance with, so much so that we station nuclear weapons in Turkey, basically says if we leave Syria, they'll commit genocide against our Kurdish allies. So now we have to violate the sovereignty of Syria to stay there because our military allies that we've given nuclear weapons to are going to commit genocide against our other allies. And that's the official fucking position of the United States military and government. That's insane. Absolutely. One might say, geez, why are we in a military alliance with genocidal maniacs? Why are we stationing nuclear weapons there? But no one asked that question. We're just told, oh, NATO's the best. You got to trust NATO, and national sovereignty matters, but we have to violate Syria's national sovereignty because, like, it's fucking nonsensical. And all you have to do is look at Afghanistan. 20 years we were there. We were told every year, it's going swimmingly. Oh, Afghanistan, it's great. Everything's fine. We leave and the country's worse off. We didn't give a shit. The United States didn't give a shit. The people running the show, they didn't give a shit about the Afghani people. Didn't care at all. They exploited those people to benefit financially and politically, and as soon as it was no longer of benefit to do so, they fucking discarded them and left them to the waste bin, and now they've moved on. And the sad part is, I know this for a fact, that the Ukrainian people are suffering now, and they're going to suffer mightily, and so many of the people that claim to give a shit, particularly people in positions of power, won't give a shit. Once we leave that country, once the Western world gets what they want out of that country, they ain't going to give a shit. They're not going to care. I actually feel terrible for the Ukrainian people because I feel that ever since leaving the Soviet Union, they haven't had leadership or a political class that gave a shit about them at all. They had a political class that was beholden to the Russians up until 2014. Then they had a political class that was beholden to the Obama administration afterwards. But no one actually gave a shit about the people of Ukraine. It's just a proxy battle. That's all. And fuck Russia. I don't have any love for Russia. But instead of us pressuring our government to say, listen, it's not our place to fund this war, we should look at what we did that could have led to this conflict escalating and try to make assurances that that sort of shit doesn't happen again, like invading Syria, putting biolabs right next to Russia, expanding NATO. We should try to stop doing that shit, but we should use our authority now to try to press for a peaceful resolution. That would be the pro-Ukrainian thing to do. Instead, now you're seeing the same people like, Dylan Burns, I talked to Dylan Burns over a year ago. He said, it's over. Russia doesn't have a chance. They're done. And I said, well, great. Then why are we still funding it? It's over, right? Well, now when I talked to him 6 months ago, he says, well, when I said it was over, what I meant was, sure, Russia might be able to keep Crimea, but they'll never take over Kiev. And they'll never be able to expand to Poland or anything like that. They're a paper tiger. It's like, okay, so then the whole we have to fight them over there so we don't fight them over here. That's bullshit. Russia is no longer a threat to the United States, right? Right, exactly. And as we see, I don't trust any of the news that comes out of Ukraine because I don't have time to delve into it, and I know that there's propaganda on both sides of the issue. But now what we're seeing from Western outlets is like, well, there's no end in sight. We might have to fund this for several years. No shit. The same people that were just telling... Go ahead.
It's wild what happened. It's just there was a shift in military strategy that people didn't really foresee, and the shift was towards basically this wild combination of modern and World War I tactics, where because there is no hiding on the battlefield, everybody is getting detected. The only place where you can sort of hide is in foliage, in forests. And forests are basically, there's a limited amount of them.
Sure.
So you don't, you enter a forest and then that's it, you don't have the next move. So basically it all became trench warfare with precision artillery, where none of the modern inventions matter much. Like you you can use long range targeted missiles and artillery. That's effective, but you can't use close air support. You can't use large drones. They just don't, they have to stay away. Everything has to be, everything that's visible gets destroyed. And the thing that matters is small drones and artillery concentration and being able to dig trenches. And so that's what both sides are doing. They're digging trenches, and anyone who tries to push into the trenches gets hit with endless minefields, with drones, and with very cheap asymmetric warfare, where none of the weapons we've been developing for the past, 40 years matter much. Like all of these, breakthroughs with these, amazing tanks, they don't lead to anything. And so now, even though the United States provides incredible intelligence to your Ukrainian side, and technologically they have the edge, Russians, simply by quantity of their artillery and by using I don't know if I'll call it low tech, but using like mass produced Iranian and Chinese drones, they're staying in the fight. And in terms of the casualty numbers, I think they're favorable to them. They're like sustainable with Russia's declining population. I don't think it's good for Russia. I think both countries are heading towards a collapse. But it's definitely revealing, the weakness of these military doctrines. It's apparently not that easy to defeat somebody, and I don't see like a shift in what weapons are being developed or sent to Ukraine. So it all smells like a little bit of fraud, where the people who get defrauded are the actual young men who go to that battlefield and get turned into mincemeat. Like the casualties aren't really that high because medicine is very. I'm talking about like dead. The number of dead isn't high.
Right.
The number of casualties where people will not have normal lives anymore, that's astronomical. Those numbers are huge.
Yeah, I don't have any reason to dispute what you're saying. I think that sounds right. But I think that we're not going to know like the on the field reporting because it's so muddied and there's such a fog of war. And both sides,
Yes.
who do you trust? I'm not going to trust the fucking Russians. They clearly have skin in the game for propaganda. I'm not going to trust the Ukrainians or the Western media. They're clearly propagandizing. The truth is somewhere in between. And I think what you're saying is largely true, that this is a dug-in battle, that there's not going to be a clear victor. It's just not going to happen. That no one can provide a scenario. All the people that are saying fund Ukraine, I have yet to hear a credible scenario how this ends. Like, where is the evidence? It's like, okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and then Russia surrenders. I don't hear a claim. All of their claims are contradictory. On one hand, they're telling us Russia's on the precipice of defeat, they're a paper tiger, Ukraine's kicking ass. On the other hand, they're saying we have to perpetually send billions of dollars to Ukraine because if we don't, Russia will overwhelm them. Right? These are contradictory opinions. Right? And that's how you know that it's bullshit. And I truly care about the people of Ukraine. I care about the people of Russia. I care about the people insert country. I do. I absolutely care. I also am a nationalist in that I think it is the role of our government to work exclusively for the people of this country. However, with the doctrine of cause no intentional harm to people around the world. What I continually see is that people, particularly on the left, but also many on the right, cause these terrible situations and then say because of the terrible situation that's caused by their state interventionism that now we have to rely on the state for the solution. Right? So you hear the left say this all the time. We destabilized Venezuela. Now we have to accept all of these immigrants from Venezuela. And it's like, how about we start at the root? Why do we start not trusting the very intel agencies that did this horrible shit in the first place? But instead, they blindly trust them no matter what, because they're very binary. Well, the intel agencies don't like Trump, so they must be good. So we'll listen to them, and then when they cause a disaster, we say, well, the United States caused that disaster. Now we have... Just like they did with lockdowns, right? They suggest...
With Russia,
go ahead.
With Russia, there was a particularly annoying situation preposterous. There's a dissident who sits in jail right now, Alexei Navalny, and one of his first letters out of jail, right as the war was beginning, he expressed a lot of outrage that now that the new war began, there are actually real sanctions against Russian oligarchs. And he asked, where were those sanctions for the past, 15 years? Where were they for the past 12 years? Where were they for the past 8 years? And the reality is that the children of all of these oligarchs and the wives and, their various friends and all the money bags, they were taking the stolen money and they were spending it in Europe, in southern France, in New York, in Florida. They have American citizenship from birth, right? They come in here to give birth, and then their children become American citizens. And the American government did nothing to stop that. And the German government, shut down their nuclear power plants to become more reliant on Russian gas and oil.
Yes. Yep.
So they were doing everything to support Putin's regime in building up, towards further aggression. They were doing that for a decade, while dissidents were actually trying to change Russia. Felt like they were getting backstabbed and abandoned.
See, I didn't know Navalny said that, but it's something that I've argued since the onset of this, that was like, if you wanted to be into a position where you could actually use hard and soft power to go after Russia, you would not have been reliant on them for energy needs, right? Like, the U.S. would have been upping their energy production, Western Europe would have been upping their energy production, or having some sort of infrastructure or some sort of deal with countries that weren't Russia, countries like the United States, to import energy. Instead, you go into a conflict with a country that you're basically beholden to. So there's like all these absurd gentleman agreements, like, well, we still need you to send natural gas, but we're going to sanction you in this ways, and we're going to arm people. None of it makes sense from the prospect of, if you're just looking at this through some sort of game theory mechanism. Like the whole thing, it all sounds like bullshit. Like, for example, well, the U.S. can't put boots on the ground because if we did, then Russia would escalate and possibly use nuclear weapons, right? Because to Russia, this is a life or death. Like, you listen to like Peter Zayan and them. I hear the left talk about him all the time. Well, they need these. The reason they invaded is they need these channels to points of exit that they've always been fighting for, and to them, it's an existential threat, and they have to do it now. It's like, okay, well, if that's the case, and that's really what the leadership of Russia is looking like, then if they're on the precipice of defeat, why aren't they going to use their best weapons? They're just going to be like, shucks, you got us. Or, we won't use nukes unless there's an actual U.S. boot in the ground. But if the U.S. sends cluster bombs that end up hitting Moscow and killing a bunch of our citizens, we'll just have a gentleman's agreement not to escalate any further. Like, none of it makes sense. United States says, we're going to kick all these Russian diplomats out and we're going to have all these sanctions, but we're going to allow our European allies to continue to buy natural gas from Russia. Like, it's absurd. And by the way, it's the same sort of absurd foreign policy that you saw when it was reliant on all of these Islamic countries that we were told are such a threat and harbor. I can't go through a fucking airport without getting felt up like I'm an 8-year-old girl with Joe Biden sniffing me because Islamic terrorism is such a big threat. Yet, we continue to engage in financial situations with these countries that these people come from. Like, so all of it is just, the foreign policy in this country, none of it makes sense until you realize, like, they're just bullshitting us. This is all just for people in positions of power. Now, Vaney's right, and I have no reason to dispute what you're saying. The West didn't give a fuck about Putin's authoritarianism. They don't give a shit at all. They only give a shit at a point where it helps them entrench their own power. That's it. And so it's like, I know there's someone in my chat right now, I had this discussion, right? You could be right that not you, but there could be an argument to be had that maybe the United States should be altruistic and be the world police, right? That there needs to be a powerful hegemon that's willing to go into places where shit's acting up and say, we're going to be the good guys, we're going to be the arbiters, we're going to make sure that the right outcome. But is the United States leadership, our intelligence agency, our military, are they the correct agents? After lie after lie, exploitation after exploitation, they lied to us about Iraq, they lied about Vietnam, they lied about Libya, they lied about Afghanistan, they lied about Syria, but this time they're right about Ukraine. Who believes this shit? And what gets me is the people that, and this is how you know it's bullshit, right? No one's making credible arguments. They're just saying, like, how dare you? Are you a Putin sympathizer? You must be paid by Vladimir Putin. Once people resort to that, you know they've lost the argument. They don't have a leg to stand on, so they just have to claim, and time after time, when I've raised these sorts of questions, I've made it quite fucking clear. I have no love for Vladimir Putin. I have no love for the Russian government. If it was up to me, Ukraine would win tomorrow, and Russia would go home with their tail between their legs. That is the outcome I would desire. And yet I could still be critical of U.S. and Western policy that put us on this collision course. And when I debate someone like I'm really important, what's the only thing he has to say to me? You're spreading Putin's talking points. That's what becomes so amazing to me.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. The way the way Putin's propaganda works is that he does say some things that are true, and then he like omits or misrepresents other facts. Like everybody, that's like typical
US
propaganda tactic. But to say that like everything he says is wrong, it would be ridiculous. Like that's not reality. People don't speak this way. He uses every tool that propaganda uses, and part of it was whenever he has an advantage or whenever he has like any sort of moral claim, he's going to make it. He's going to point to all of these conflicts, and he's going to point at the American part of the Cold War. He's going, in fact, he's not even doing like the most damage he could be doing. He could be asking, how come the water canal to Ukraine was blocked off for 8 years? That is a crime against humanity. That's a war crime.
Right.
That in itself would have been, if Russia attacked Ukraine to reopen the canal and did nothing but reopen the canal, could we argue against them? Could we say, no, your people should, they got used to this water. Your people should have your agriculture, get shut down, and all of these innocent civilians should lose their livelihood. That's not an argument anyone in the world uses. Israel is fighting against Hamas in Gaza. They're not allowed to shut off the water to Gaza and cause all those people, all of the civilian hostages there to just die in the desert. That's not acceptable in the world. And yet, again, we're coming back to the same thing. We're saying, well, how come there's these double standards? Well, it's not double standards. There's no standards.
Right. It's hierarchy.
It's pure Machiavellian victory, and and there's a moral high ground because this time we're the good guys, and this time it's like a clear aggression. And yes, I would say that the people who defend their homes against Putin, they're the good guys.
Sure.
But the problem is that the way they got into that situation was not because of them, was because of the people who drove them towards it. I think the best sort of a funny analogy was by Curtis Yarvin, who said it's like you're raising a puppy, and then you tell him to attack a lion, and the lion mauls the puppy, and yes, the puppy is the innocent victim, and the lion is the aggressor, but you're the guy who set the situation up.
Right.
You're evil.
Yeah, no, and I look at it from this perspective. Maybe it's because of who I am, right? Like, again, the reason I got into streaming in the first place was I'm as tribal as anyone. The group that I have a tribal affinity, it's not my skin color, it's not my religion or anything like that. It's my geographic and economic situation. I look at people in rural America and feel they don't have a voice. I think that they're some of the greatest people in this country. They make the country go round. They're working 9 to 5. They're working 40, 50, 60 hours. They're raising families, and they get shit on culturally, and they get shit on politically. No one gives a shit about their voices. I look at these people, and I'm one of them. I just happen, my hobby, and I have some ability that, to look into things. And when I look into these things and say, Jesus, it's so hard to parse this out. How do I explain to the guy that's the farmer that's my neighbor? It's like, listen, all of these foreign policy shit that we've been lied to over and over and over and over and over again, this time, if you really hunker down and you look into the facts and parse it out as best as you can, I'm sure you'll come to the conclusion that you need to make more sacrifices and have more of your money sent to Ukraine. I don't know how in good faith I could do that, right? And so for me, the answer is just like, until we could rein in these corrupt people in the West that are making decisions not to benefit the average person in America or the average person in Canada or even the average person in Ukraine, we should just put a moratorium on financing things like these wars. I'm sorry. You can't ask the average person, yes, it's true that there's been all of these corruption and that it's been self-centered and it's benefited people in positions of power and it's caused the exploitation of average people in our country and in countries around the world. You know, the puppy in the analogy that you said. But this time you just have to trust them. Or, you know, do your due diligence and try to parse out and look in. I'm sorry, fuck all that. I'll talk to the people that claim they're experts. Again, like, I like Dylan Burns, I do, but I'll talk to him who claims he's an expert. You go back and watch fucking discussions, debates I'm having with him in like 2020 when I'm talking about Syria, and I go through the whole timeline of Syria to the best of my knowledge, and I'm like, can you explain why we're there to, you know, the scenario I outlined for you, why we have to remain there because the Kurds will be wiped out by our allies, the Turks. If this is just about fighting ISIS, why are we fighting Assad? And he goes through, oh, well, Assad's a bad dude. And I'm like, nonetheless, that's not the stated purpose of being there. And one of the things I said to him in 2020, I said, don't you think this could piss off Russia? And he was like, great, Russia's bad. That's okay. And I was like, but you're not worried about the consequences? Not at all. Russia can't do anything. Now what?
Yeah.
Now where are you? You know?
Yeah, this is the one thing. They also don't speak about the other side, like, the other victims of all of these conflicts is, I was watching, Peter Santanello is doing great documentaries right now on YouTube on like traveling across the United States. His most recent one was like Hitchhiking with Titus, and they're like just hitchhiking with this interesting character, and they're one of the drivers that helps them. Is this technician who says that he earns about $600, a little bit more, maybe $700 a week, and immediately has to pay taxes to the tune of like $150 to $200 out of those. So he, this chunk of money, this is like his children, his future home, all of the like his ability to work less than 70 hours a week to make ends meet and to sustain his business. All of that's invisible. He never sees that, and so he doesn't know what he lost. If that man had that, like he had a home, he had a family, and a man from the government came in and killed a fourth of his children and burned his home down, then that man would rebel. Course. Because that actually does happen to him, except it happens slowly and not as dramatically and over time. He doesn't have the children, he doesn't have as big of a home, and his life is more miserable, but he doesn't feel it because it's like gradual. We're being boiled very gradually, and yet, but now he does see all of that money go overseas for noble causes. Yeah.
It's so frustrating. I remember when the Ukraine conflict started, we're just coming out of COVID. Why, I was writing for John Burke's channel and I wrote this essay, it was small, but I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not willing to ask the average American to make more sacrifice. Why is it always them? Why is it, climate change? Oh, we need changes. It's always the 9-to-5 guy. It's the middle class or poor people. It's them that all of these policies are, you need to make more sacrifices. Same with this Ukraine situation. And they when you look at inflation and stuff, what do they, we're blaming, it's Putin's fault. It's Russia's fault. It's the same with COVID. It was, the average person, sorry, your job's non-essential. You can't go to work. Sorry, you can't go to your family member's funeral. Sorry, you can't go visit your mom in the nursing home. It's average people. The elites didn't give a shit. They violated the rules all the time. They didn't give a shit. And I'm sorry, I'm sick and tired of being asked by elites to make more sacrifices. How many billions are we going to have to send to Ukraine. And by the way, this is an argument that the left makes that's actually true, right? I might say, well, as long as there's people that need help in this country, why are we sending money to Ukraine? And they'll be like, oh, well, we could do both. Would you be willing to spend billions? No! The government spends too much money. There are certain things that we could reprioritize to help Americans, but the point is, if we're going to be doing anything, it should be to help the American people first and foremost. Instead, as always, this is the prediction I'm willing to make about the Ukraine, we will be told in the future, 10 years, 20 years in the future, a bunch of those weapons and shit we sent to Ukraine, now they're in the hands of nefarious actors. Things are really bad in Ukraine, and we helped cause it. Now we have to go back in. Just like we were told in Afghanistan. We armed the Mujahideen that became, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Then we were told, sorry, we got to go back there for 20 years and spend trillions of dollars. So, I mean, it's disgusting. Again, I feel terrible for the people of Ukraine. I feel terrible for the average people in Russia. If it was up to me, the people of Ukraine would win tomorrow. But that's not how simple it is. And I refuse to assume or to be blind to the propaganda that we're being piled on, by these people that only seek to benefit their own selves. And they'll throw us under the bus just like they'll throw Ukrainians under the bus, just like they threw Afghanis under the bus. When it becomes convenient to do so. But I'm going to end the stream here soon. But Casimir, do you have anything you want to shout out? A channel or anything you're doing?
It's fine. It was fun talking to you.
Yeah,
as always.
We'll have to talk about some topics, some other stuff tomorrow. This is my idea. I want to talk about Bidenomics tomorrow, and I'll just get your take on this real quick, and I'll get you out of here. Politically, does it make... I'm not talking about the on-the-ground situation. I'm just talking about the game of politics. Does it not seem like one of the all-time bad moves for the Biden administration to constantly talk up how well the economy is when it's blatantly not true? Like, wouldn't they be further served to be like, sure, things are bad, but it's not our fault, it's Trump's fault, or it's COVID's fault. But instead, they continue to gaslight people how great the economy is. And that's one issue. It doesn't matter how much you have the media selling you that things are going great, that the economy's going great. If you can't afford groceries, you fucking know they're bullshitting you. So doesn't it seem like an incredible political blunder?
I don't think so. I think that this... it's better understood if you read through like the history of the Soviet Union and how the members of the Politburo were switched up. So, when Stalin is in power, he's, the number one guy and everything's great about him. And then he loses power and then he dies to a stroke. And suddenly he's unmasked as the biggest villain and everything he did is horrible. And then, he has a successor and the same happened to his successor and to his successor and to his successor. And so the regime likes to the propaganda machine always has to do the same thing, is to say that nothing, nothing's wrong, that America has a lot of potential, and they have to look at the bright side all the time. Even as the whole Soviet Union was collapsing, and and nuclear power plants in Ukraine were going off and melting down, they were still in spin mode, and they remain in spin mode until reality hits them in the face, which is. When Donald Trump was elected the first time, that was, their one shock. I think that they are just a lot more ready, and public opinion matters much less. And they're talking to a much narrower audience. The audience they're talking to are the activists that they need to carry out, the plans. The people who are religiously within the party. And so they need to hear, this spin all the time, because they're the ones that are, gathering the votes. They're the ones going, to the polling stations, and they believe that those loyal party members are the ones needed to remain in power, whereas public opinion is going to be controlled by the media machine. That's the promise. In terms of Biden in particular. I expect a switcheroo. So if you use the Soviet analogy, it's Bidenomics. Everything is great, and then Biden gets replaced, and suddenly he gets blamed for everything.
Yeah.
But like happened to George Bush, probably not within his lifetime because he's so old. But let's say if he lived another 15 years, he would be restored. They would you know, they would dump all the problems on him, but then 10 years later they would restore him like they restored George Bush. With Biden, it will probably happen posthumously. Like they will, you know, whitewash his image, you know, 10 years after.
He just loved his son. That's all it was. He was a man who just loved his son. You know, that's. But now,
it's going to be like a tragic story,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That's sort of what I'll be talking about tomorrow. But thanks as always coming on, Casimir. We'll talk soon, and I appreciate it. It's nice having someone to talk to because sometimes even as long-winded as I am, it's nice to have someone else on. I run out of things to say. So.
Cheers.
All right, take it easy, man. Yeah. We'll talk soon. So yeah, that's Casimir. Fantastic dude. I love talking to him. And ANCAP, him and Fabian, you know, two of the best ANCAPs I think out there, even though I don't completely agree with their worldview. I think we're in agreement on sort of 95% of things. But even we could have knockdown, drag-out, screaming matches at each other over that 5%. But I really like him. I think that he's a great guy. I always enjoy talking to him. Also, his mic's way better than it used to be. So he's gotten better with that. What's up, Aftershock? Yes, I can be long-winded. So yeah, tomorrow we're going to talk about Bidenomics. Did I get your message? Yeah, I did about the message on the video you did for me. Yeah, I got it. I did. I've been real busy today. I do apologize for that. But unless you sent me a new one that I'm unaware of. Let's see. No, I got your message. I'll be putting that video up tomorrow morning. I'll try to keep them to 1 minute as well. It's just nonsense. Merch. I did have a couple shirts. I sold like 2 or 3 shirts in the past with just my face on them. So maybe I'll do. My wife has a Cricut. Maybe I'll get some merch made for, you know, really good friends of the show or something like that. But yeah, a good show tonight. The lefty that called in, as always. Who would have thought? It's just terrible. It amazes me how people can't, you know, just look at that in a nutshell. That's what I talk about all the time when I say that these people aren't interested in the truth. They're not interested in a good faith discussion. How hard would that be? If I called in and, like, if someone was saying, the Proud Boys are Nazis, and I called in to disagree and I said, I don't think the Proud Boys are Nazis. The first reason is Enrique Tarrio, the guy that runs them, he's actually a person of color. So, and they said, okay, on your first port, that Enrique Tarrio being a person of color proves they're not Nazi. I said, yeah, that's what I said. But not this guy. He says, no, they're Jews in the Azov Battalion. And I'm like, okay, on that point. No, I didn't say that. Yeah, that's clearly what you said. No, I didn't say it. Because you want me to say I said it, so therefore I'm going to say I didn't say it. What's the point of a conversation at that point? It's your claim. You've made claims. I'm going to question those claims or debate those claims. But if you make a claim and then right out of the gate before I even question, I'm like, okay, you said this, right? And he says, no, I didn't say it. That just gives you a roadmap of how that entire conversation is going to go. That's it. Why wouldn't he say, sure, I made that claim. I stand by it. Go ahead. What do you have to say? But he's like, no, you want me to say I made that claim. Therefore, I won't. It's absurd. And this happens all the time when you're engaged in these online debates. Right? People, instead of saying, this is what my opinion is, they'll say, where's he going? If I say this, he might say that. So I'm never gonna take a position on anything. If he says, did you say this? I'll always say, no, I didn't say that. Because if I say yes, he might have something to say against that. That's people that aren't, thank you so much, Dodgy. That's people that aren't confident in their position. Those are people that are trying to win arguments. They're not trying to have a discussion, getting to the bottom of something or getting to a factual basis of something. They don't give a shit about that. And you'll notice that, like, even when I debate Destiny or someone like that, they'll be like, can you answer this? I'm always, almost 98% of the time, I'm like, yes or no. And then I'll be like, let me expound. But I give solid answers. It's why I like debating someone like Andrew Wilson, Big Papa Fascist. He'll say yes or no. He'll answer your position. It might be an answer that you think is bad. That's fine. At least you could have a discussion then. But these duplicitous people that just want to beat around the bush, they don't give a shit about this discussion. It's all power play for them. So I will be you can check out my TikTok channel. You can I'm putting content up there. And then a day after it goes on TikTok, it'll be on my YouTube Shorts. So I'll have a YouTube Short video coming out tomorrow. Probably another TikTok video coming out tomorrow. Tomorrow evening, hopefully we'll be talking about Bidenomics, unless I get a debate or something like that lined up. But yeah, it should be a good week. I appreciate all of you being here. Let's find someone to raid on Twitch. And then I'm going to go do some paperwork and get to bed at a reasonable hour. Isn't that great? So special thanks to Casimir for calling in tonight. Always enjoy talking to him. I think he's one of the better people out there that doesn't get a lot of attention. Let's see. We got Prime K's. Cherry. Let's raid Cherry. Cherry moderated a debate that I had. I thought she was a bit biased and acting as a debater in it, but I don't have hard feelings or anything. And to her credit, she had messaged me and said she'll try to be less of a debater next time. I'm not saying she has to change her style. Again, I used to do panels with John Burke all the time. John Burke was moderator and debater at the same time. That's fine. But then people are going to treat you like a debater and not a moderator. But I think she says she's talking to Alex from PWF. So hopefully it'll be something good. So thank you all. I really appreciate it. You guys are the best. I appreciate all the financial support. I appreciate all of the support. People that clip my content. People that are promoting my content in places like Twitter. People that are just chatting to me in here. I really do appreciate all of it. So thank you so much. I'll see you all tomorrow around 8 p.m. Eastern. As always, have a good one.
This one person, and then you take a conservative family, and this one trans woman is more attractive than your wife, and she got